Welcome to Impact Pasadena. I'm delighted to have as my guest today City Council Member Gene Masuda. Gene, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Masuda has been on the City Council since 2011. 7 years, congratulations, or condolences, whichever is appropriate.
Thank you.
He's served in a number of commissions and also as vice mayor for, I believe it was 2 years that you served as vice mayor.
I did.
He represents District 4, which as some of you may know is East Pasadena, Hastings Ranch, and the areas around there. So I'm delighted to welcome you today.
Thank you very much.
So I know you have an interesting story in your family, and you've lived in Pasadena now for 30 years, I believe.
Well, 34. We came in 1985.
There you are. So you've seen the changes in Pasadena through the years.
I have.
And I know you started your own business in Pasadena as well.
It wasn't in Pasadena. It was actually in Monterey Park where I started my business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And
And do you still work in the business, or have you retired from the business yourself?
I'm not doing that work that I was doing over then, but I'm doing the part-time work that I was doing, and that was managing my family's real estate.
Oh, okay.
And I'm still doing that.
Well, people don't realize how much work it is and how much time you put in as a city council member. I mean, for the pittance, I'm afraid to say that they pay you, it's practically a full-time job. I know you had mentioned that you were up until 1:15 in the morning on the last city council meeting on Monday, so it takes a lot of time and effort. You'd probably agree.
It does.
But I wanted to first ask you about your family and the impact of World War II on your family and on your generation. I know many of us have relatives, grandparents, and parents who went through World War II, but your family had a very particular and very difficult experience. Could you talk a little bit about it today?
Oh, I would love to tell you about it, actually. Well, I wasn't born during that time.
Right.
But my grandparents on both sides came from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And during World War II, they had to go to internment camps. Both my parents were born in Sacramento.
American citizens, of
Yes,
course.
let me correct that.
Yeah.
Seattle.
Oh, okay.
And my mother's side was from Bainbridge Island. That was actually the first place that they pulled people to go to internment camp.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a difficult life for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they experienced so much hate. And but they didn't want us to feel that experience they went through, so they never talked about it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, for those of our viewers who don't know, that many Japanese Americans were interned during the war in an action that was later declared unconstitutional, in fact. But they lost their property, they lost their freedom, and their lives were impacted forever as a result of this. And I'm sure that was something that your family shared as well.
You hear a lot of stories where people were in college, you know, and being pulled and having to go to internment camp, and they never went back.
Yeah.
And at PCC, I remember that they gave some of these individuals some, what do you call those degrees when?
Honorary
degrees.
Yeah.
And that, I went to that graduation, and I thought that was just so heartwarming to see that.
Yeah. Well, it was a dark time in our history, and you know, I hope we learned some lessons from it. I think we have. I think there's been some emphasis on it lately as a way to acknowledge some of the things, the wrongs that were done.
Well, after the war, actually, a lot of the families didn't come back to California. My parents went to Chicago. My wife's parents went to Cleveland. Many people went to New York because coming back right away after the war, there was a lot of discrimination at that point as well.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to imagine today, although it perhaps isn't so hard to imagine because we always have issues about racial segregation, racial discrimination, issues around immigration. So I suppose it'll never go away, but hopefully we'll learn some lessons from it. And thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah. So this all was before you were born, and you grew up here in the San Gabriel Valley, I understand.
Yes.
And went to Cal State LA.
School of Business.
School of Business. So you were interested in business and started your own business. How did you get involved in the political world and leadership in Pasadena?
Well, my wife and I came to Pasadena in 1985.
Yeah.
And the way I got involved with it is I have to start at the Huntington Hospital. Really, that was like my beginning of being a volunteer. And that started in 1992. So, when you're a volunteer, you learn to be of service and help people. And I met other people that wanted to do and have that experience as well. What got me involved is, like the boards you were saying that I was involved with, but it came down to an issue. I was given a flyer, and there was this meeting at Ability First, and you were telling me you knew where that was.
Yeah.
And I went to that meeting, and the place was packed with people, and everybody was upset.
Yeah.
And it had to do with putting storage in the zoned open space in the Edison corridor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the issue that got me involved. We went to the city council meeting with our signs, Pasadena open space preservation, don't take away our open space and put in storage, which is against the law to put storage in a zoned open space.
Right.
So Mayor Bogart and the city council stopped that whole program. Mm-hmm. It was all about money.
Uh-huh.
So that's what got me in.
Well, it's interesting, too, because the story you tell is very characteristic of Pasadena. People are very active here. I know Mayor Tornak sometimes says that folks in other cities come home from work, they sit down and watch TV. Folks in Pasadena come home, have dinner, and go out to a meeting.
They do.
So you've experienced that.
And I admire those people. They come in and they talk about the affordable housing, or they're talking about we need rent control, or the people sometimes come and they're anti-police and stuff, but it really keeps you on your toes, and you have to stay ahead of a lot of these issues that come up.
Well, and I find it that as a great elected representative, one of the things that I'm sure you experience is you learn so much from your constituents. You really get a feeling of what people want and how to approach issues.
Every council district has very, very smart people with different experiences that you learn from. If you don't, you're not taking advantage of that opportunity.
Good way to put it. Good
absolutely.
way to put it. Well, let's dig down a little bit on the city. I mean, one of the things that I'm interested in is how you would see the city going forward over the next 5 or 10 years, and some of what of our biggest challenges, sort of from a 30,000-foot level, what we need to be thinking about as a city.
Probably one of our biggest challenges right now is our funding. Mm-hmm. And we do pretty well for our size city, as we're pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Our general fund that takes care of our services is right around 235 to 200, and this year it's going to be something like $245 million for our general fund, which takes care of our services. Mm-hmm. Next year, we're projected to be in the red by $3.5 million. And that's because of our CalPERS contribution that we have to make. So basically it works like this. You know about our general fund.
Yeah.
We have to pay it every year,
Right.
And we're obligated to pay it. But our city manager is telling us from starting next year to 5 years, that $30 million for CalPERS payment is going to go to 65.
Yeah, we might explain that a little bit for the viewers, that the CalPERS is our contribution to the California pension system, and they've, because of the performance or not so good performances of their.
Except for this year, they did
They
well.
did well, but they've asked for more contributions to keep up the capital, and
right.
so every state entity, really. Cities, colleges are all having to pony up, and it's not necessarily money that they've got in the bank.
And some cities have gone bankrupt because of it.
Yeah.
And
something we have no control over, unfortunately.
that's right. Our city's doing well, but we have a $500 million pension liability, unfunded pension liability, so we have to be careful ourselves. You know, we are okay in that regard, but we have to be careful as well.
As long as we're on pensions, what do you see as because we're talking about long-term here, what is the long-term solution to the pension crisis that's developed?
We're hoping that from the state level, they do something. But as far as the city of Pasadena, when I came in 7 years ago, no employee was paying their share of their pension contributions. Now they're paying 100%. It's a difficult thing. Now the new employees, they're not getting the same pension plan as the old employees. So
because we simply couldn't afford it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
we want to do right by our police and fire and the other employees, but at the same
right.
time, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money.
That's right. And not only that, we're paying for pensions, and we're not getting services any longer.
Yeah. Well, let me talk about a little bit more about the financial. You said that that's really one of the major challenges going forward, and there have been some proposals. In fact, there's a sales tax that's being proposed to the voters. Where are we with the sales tax? I know that Mayor Tornak has proposed it, and I believe it's going to be on the ballot. Am I correct?
You're right, and your question is so timely because on Monday, the council unanimously voted to put it on the ballot for November, and we have to tell people that we're not voting for the tax. You are voting for the tax. We're giving you that opportunity to vote or not vote for it. And at that meeting, I think 100% of the council members said that they are not for taxes, but we have to make sure that we have enough funds to pay for the services that they're used to.
Yeah. So to put you on the spot, do you support the sales tax? Would it be something you would vote for?
I will. I will support it. I have supported it, and we all voted for it on Monday, even though we don't like to have taxes for our residents. It's not the 75 cents on the $100 that I think the average person in Pasadena is going to feel, but it's the people that are struggling that will feel it, and that's where we spent a lot of time talking about it in the past.
Yeah, in the sense that a sales tax isn't actually equal. It hits lower income people harder because in their pocketbooks.
Yes.
What about the economic impact of this? Do you see that it would have an effect on our city or not?
Oh, it would. I think.
I mean, a negative impact on the businesses.
Well, it could. You know, I don't want to pretend it's an absolute easy, decision. But from our standpoint, that 50 cents for the city and the 25 cents that will go to PUSD for our public schools, that 50 cents will be, it's estimated to come out to about $20 million for the city of Pasadena. That would really help infrastructure, police, fire, cutting trees,
and the choice for the voter is really, do you want to pay the tax or do you want to give up certain services?
That's right.
a pretty stark choice, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're prepared if it fails to make those cuts. But I don't think, Hoyt, that our residents, they're used to those services, and I think that will be the topic or the thing that makes them vote for this. Like, I want to keep those services as well, especially when it comes to infrastructure. When we have hot days and you flip on the air conditioner, it's nice when it's going. When you turn the water faucet on. You want to make sure that water's there. Yeah, just the simple things that we're used to.
That's right. That's right. And I hope that they make the right decision. I really agree with you about it, and with the city council. One of the other issues, and I know that you've been at the forefront of some of this, is related to development and housing. To me, I see the issue of housing has several different layers to it. One is the high price of housing for our young people who want to live in Pasadena. I know my son is now looking for a house, and it's just really tough. It's not like when we were younger. The other issue is development and keeping the character of our city, and while still moving forward and providing housing. And the final element is the homeless issue, which we see in the parks and around town. So maybe if you could address each of those,
Okay.
That would be great.
Well, let's start off with the young people not being able to afford. You hit it right on the nail. It's very difficult. We're losing a lot of families, and you lose families, your public schools enrollment goes down,
Right.
and that has been happening. So we want to make sure that young people can afford to live here, and that's why we support the inclusionary housing ordinance. When these new units come up with 10 or more, that 15% goes to affordable housing. We all support that.
But just let me interrupt on
Sure.
that score for the people who are looking for the young professionals or people like that who are looking for work, for housing. I mean, there's a real shortage, and whether you have inclusionary housing or not, you still don't have enough housing to provide for that segment. What would be the answer to that and still balance development?
It's a difficult subject because not having enough, and Pasadena is a city that people want to live in. That supply and demand comparison, it makes it difficult because the prices keep going up.
Yeah.
So it's hard for the young person to catch up to that.
Yeah. Well, on the development front, there's, Pasadena needs to keep moving forward.
Yes.
We're in the 21st century, but at the same time, we have a very special place. We want to keep the character of it. And I know this has been an issue that's in the forefront very recently, in the last few years for sure, development. And how do you do rational development and still manage affordability and some of these other issues?
Well, as you know, that we don't control what private people do because they have property rights.
Right.
It's market driven.
Yeah.
But we can help say what we try to have in certain areas. Not too much development. We listen to our residents, and that's what I do. Your question is so timely because on Monday I opposed a big project in my district.
Yes.
550 apartment units on a very busy street already, where we're already having a lot of traffic, next to the freeway, where we know that it's not good to live there.
Yeah.
And there's contamination in the soil. So I didn't win that fight.
Right.
But it was a 5-3 vote to go forward. But there were some added protection things for people that would live there, and that would be it would be in their contract to let them know that living near a freeway is not healthy.
Yeah. So it is a private market issue, but at the same time, the city can exercise some control, things that you point out. Is it a question of concentrating development in certain areas, for example, around the freeway or in Old Town or other areas? And I know your district is largely single family, so that's another character of the city that we want to preserve too. So what's the answer here? Do we sort of have zones that are high development, or how is that working?
Well, in a way we do. During the general plan, we had caps. And the mayor actually, during that discussion of this units that I opposed, he actually told the audience how I fought to keep the cap down, and it really was a lonely fight. I don't know if you've ever been in something like that, but yeah, in fact, the planning staff was saying, let's have 1,500 as a cap in your district. And I said, that's too many. And then when 3 of your commissions agreed to 1,250, you're almost kind of like you're stuck in a hard place.
Yeah.
But I still held out. The mayor knew because he was on the council,
Yeah.
and it ended up to be 850, 750 in East Pasadena, and 100 in Lamanda Park.
Yeah.
So that's the only time you can do something about, we were talking about you can't do anything against private people buying
Yeah.
something because
Yeah.
of property rights, but for policy and during the general plan, you can make a difference.
Yeah. Well, and politics is about compromise ultimately.
Yes.
So, and it's true. I'm glad you brought up the idea that people can make a difference, because your constituents and you as their representative can make a difference in modulating some of these where you think they're going too much in one direction or another.
Right.
That's why I always urge people to go to city council meetings and get involved on an issue,
Yes.
as you did with Ability First when you
Yes.
first started. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. What about homelessness? I know we struggle.
We, as you know, we do a count every year, all night long. I don't know if it goes in the day or the night, but we do a count. Our homeless numbers are down, but this last year it went up 18%. I think the issue for us now is that we have the real chronic homeless now that refuse services. They refuse going to, say, Union Station. They'll take the food,
Yeah.
but they don't want to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're very, they express that, and we just kind of like do what we can in that area. What we're really proud of is that in Pasadena that we have the Hope Team, and we have 3 Hope Teams, and it's a police officer with a Los Angeles County mental health person. This is all they do is they go and assist homeless people and tell them about the services and try to persuade them to go to get some residential help and food and whatever they need, and we're proud of that.
Yeah, because often my observation, and I'm sure the average person sees this, is that it's a issue of mental health, oftentimes, and
It is.
it's difficult to treat people. I think this all goes back to 40 years ago. I think when there was certain legislation that released folks from mental health treatment, and they ended up on the streets.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's not only the people that have mental illness, people that are on drugs
Yeah.
and alcohol, and they have so many other issues that really hurt them.
Let me bring up a somewhat related, although really not directly related issue, which is that I know at PCC, where I'm the Board of Trustees, we have about 800 undocumented students who are facing just a lot of anxiety about their situation. And we see this citywide, that we have residents who are undocumented. What is it? I know that we decided not to take the sanctuary city route for various, I think, reasonable reasons. But what is it that we can do to assist those folks while they're in this limbo in terms of the national issues, the national law regarding DACA? What can we do to support our students and our residents?
Give them good information. I know at PCC they give them really good information, your counselors. We have a health department, and I'm sure in our housing department, those folks are able to give good information to people that are undocumented. Their trust level is really low.
Yeah.
And so, I don't have an answer for that, but I'm hoping that they do get good information. When I read about these immigration lawyers that are trying to help, and then you hear that they're just trying to take money from people, and it's kind of it's kind of a scam,
Yeah.
that's when I get angry.
Yeah.
And even the people that are coming from wherever they were, like let's just take a country like Mexico,
Right.
sometimes they're working with some people and they're getting taken as well.
Yeah.
So it works on both sides of the border, and not only from Mexico and United States, but other countries as well.
Yeah.
And I really feel
Where is
bad.
the city standing now on the cooperation with ICE? Do we have a policy on that in the city, or is it?
Our police have told us that their position is that they don't get involved with immigration. And we believe them.
Do you approve of that policy? Do you think it's a wise?
Well, that's a police decision. It's not a council decision. So, as long as I've been on the council, we don't try to get into these topics that we have no control over.
Yes.
So it sounds like a cop-out, but we just don't. But the police tell us, and they report to us, and they tell us what their policies are, and then we listen and get informed that way.
I think that's a reasonable position. I don't see that necessarily as a cop-out, because they're the ones who are dealing on the front lines with this, and they see, and I think our police department understands the community. I really do. I think you'd probably agree with me there. And there are things where the council can set oversight and policy, but to try to second guess too much the police is probably a fool's errand, I would say.
Well, as you know, I have a lot of respect for our police and fire, and it's a difficult job.
Yeah.
Probably the most difficult job that there is.
So we're going to get into this in the next segment when we talk about policing and stuff. But just to throw it out there, what about these proposals of a police oversight board that you've heard that have been presented to the council? Is that something you'd go along with, or what's your view?
Well, I was on public safety for almost 7 years, and we had those activists in front of us, and the oversight board is not only the police, but it's us.
Yeah.
And I don't support those oversight boards. When that came up a couple years ago, I was definitely against it.
Well, we're going to talk in the next segment about a lot of things, including issues like this and police, crime. I want to touch on traffic to a certain extent, because I know as a city council person, that's something you occasionally hear about.
Oh, there's no traffic in Pasadena.
Well, it's funny because I grew up on the East Coast, and I know traffic in Pasadena. But people have lived here a long time. They experience it. Even my wife, who's only been here a few years, 25, actually, she says, it's taken me a long time to go across California to the other side of town. We also want to talk about education, I think, because PUSD is an important part of our community. So let me thank you for this segment, and Councilmember Gene Masuda, it's delightful to have you here. We're going to continue this conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Gene. And we can just... This program was produced by Pasadena Media for the Arroyo Channel.